sisters, it's me, Pele Otis, coming up with an Afrobeat tune. And a sound.
Versus Emotion Podcast, organic conversations with creative minds. Hello world and welcome back to Versus Emotion. I am Laura Elemi, founder of VIM, writer and producer of this space. All our guests on VIM do represent somebody really unique to us, and every single guest is a perfect example of talent and soul waves spread around for anyone to catch like shooting stars and keep in their memory, and for future generations to discover like a virtual time capsule. And we are all about organic conversations, authentic conversations with creative minds. And today we are here to celebrate the life of a true trailblazer, a pioneer, the protagonist of a piece of Black music history, Sonny Roberts. And here with us today, his legacy of light, his beautiful daughter and talented fashion and interior designer, Cleon Roberts. Hi, Cleon, how are you?
Hi, Laura. I'm good, thank you. Very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really happy we reconnected. I was truly inspired by your father's story and by the way you're actually continuing the legacy and keeping on this amazing piece of Black music history alive. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
Thank you for having me. So am I.
Of course. So, as we said, Sonny Roberts, your father, your dad, UK and Jamaican trailblazer of Black music, and actually the founder of the first Black-owned music record studio called Planeton.
Yeah.
Can you tell us? Shall we start from there? Shall we start from when your dad moved to the UK and actually founded the studio?
Yes. Let's start from the very beginning. Um, yes, my father came to the UK from Jamaica, um, and he was a carpenter by trade, learnt his trade in Jamaica. He was born in the country of a place called Manchester, a little village called Spice Grove in Manchester. And he was a very, very talented as a boy growing up, doing carpentry. So to further his career and talents, an aunt sent him to Kingston. And that's where he first got his taste of music. And that was downtown Kingston. And, back then that was in the 50s. So, as you can imagine, 40s and 50s, you can imagine that was the hub of when all the music sound systems and everything started in Jamaica, and there was a lot there. So he carried that. An aunt secured his passage to come to England. That was when the call of Windrush came about, and so he came to England with one grip in his hand, with some vinyl and his tools, and ended living up in Ladbroke Grove. That's where he was living, and you know, went started off working in carpentry factories, and that's where he met my godfather. So the two of them decided to work together and set about and doing, private commissions, carpentry private commissions. But it was at the time when a light bulb struck for my father, where he had noticed that, to supplement his income, and he was a very good carpenter, he thought, well, why don't I make speaker boxes? And in London at that time, there was a surgence, that was the start of sound systems. You had Duke Vin, Duke Reed, and who were, had started in the industry. So he was making speaker boxes, and then he ended up, again, to supplement his income. Then he thought, well, why don't I do it myself? So he set up a small sound system called Lavender, and he was playing at parties and weddings and funeral, and and at that time it was a time where there was nothing for the West Indian community, for socialize. So with that, obviously, if you're having your a sound system, you're going to attract singers and people that will come to the parties. And that was then he was asked, and then there was nowhere for them to record their music. And so again, it was another light bulb moment for my father, Sonny. And so he decided to open up a studio, he actually built his own recording studio. And that was again using his skills, his carpentry skills, and set about looking for premises, and ended up in Kilburn, on Kilburn High Road, and set about looking for premises and asking around. And it's an amazing story, actually, because he was, again, it was sort of networking and, the community supporting each other. Again, Windrush community. And he was, a friend had pointed to him and introduced him to an Indian Jamaican who was a tailor. And as luck would have it, he had his own premises, but he was working from home. And he had a little tailoring business in part of the home, and he had space in the basement. So he basically took my dad to the spot, and yeah, my dad took the location, and that was it. He set about building his studio, and that premises was at 108 Cambridge Road in Kilburn, in
So
London.
Kilburn, I'm telling you, Kilburn and Kilburn High Road in particular, they have a piece in our story between you and me as well, because our friend in common, the wonderful Alan
Yes,
Higgins, who is also an amazing artist, by the way, so actually helped us to reconnect recently, because we had met a long time ago, right? And
that's
then
right.
we, for different reasons, life throws at you. We actually hadn't seen each other for quite a long time, and uh, Kilburn High Road is the place where Alan works most of the time. So it was always, some you kept in touch with him, and then we actually reconnected through Alan, and going to his place of work. I was hearing a lot about you, and I'm sure you were hearing a lot about me, and then we
That's right.
reconnected. And also, there is another thing I read, and you have an incredible amount of material about your dad, Sonny Roberts. And I was reading that actually the first time that he got in touch with Island Records and with Chris Blackwell, it was because Blackwell is the founder of Island Records. Uh,
Mm,
Actually, he was appointed to do some carpentry in his flat, and then they became friends. And
that's
then
right.
the story developed that way. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? Because this was actually the beginning of Planeton and Orbiton at the record shop. We will talk about that later,
Mm.
becoming really one of the points of reference for
Yes, yes,
London music lovers of that particular genre. Yes, so tell us what happened there.
yes. So, my dad and his my godfather, Lenny Brown, they were going around London and obviously meeting people, and one of the commissions was Chris Blackwell. So they did some work at his flat, and because Chris was born in Jamaica, so you're going to have even though as a white man he was a white Jamaican, but the connection again, because you have to remember back that in that time there wasn't much like the vibrancy that you see now of West Indian food, and it wasn't like that back then.
It
So
was very much underground, right? That kind of culture.
very,
So yeah.
very much. And, so to meet a fellow Jamaican and, they just instantly got on. And so then my dad also, when Island Records, they had premises in Connaught Square. So my dad did some work there at his offices. And But during that time, obviously, my dad had set up Planetone Studios, and I think also, the influence of meeting Chris, having a record label, him starting Island Records, because my dad met Chris when he was just starting Island Records. It was just the very, very beginning. So the two of them, I would have thought they would have inspired each other. Obviously, Chris had a bit of income, not much, because apparently, and I've actually heard Chris say that. We went to lunch once with him, and to witness him say, in front of all of his staff, and he stood up and he said, "Look," and he pointed to my father and he says, "I know this man from the very beginning, and I'm so honored to have Sonny sitting at the table with me." And he pointed at him and said, "This man knew me when I had nothing. I was just starting at the very beginning of Island Records, selling records out of his little mini, because Chris used to have a mini." So yeah, the connection there was very strong. However, as Island were growing, more artists were descending on Island Records. Just coming from Jamaica, trying to get a record deal and to make music. But where Island Records was situated was in the centre of London, which was pretty much kind of gentrified then. So it brought the attention of the neighbours and the landlord. And, well, the neighbours had complained to the landlord. So Chris was asked to move premises. So he had asked my dad, as you do, you ask around, do you know of any premises, because I have to vacate. So my dad said, "Look, where my studio is, the landlord is it's quite a big property. I will ask him to see if there are premises." And as luck would have it, there was premises there. So Island Records moved to 108 Cambridge Road. So you can imagine that was the start. My dad's studio was in the basement, the ground floor, sorry, and then you had Island on the next floor. But this the incredible part of this story was the landlord who owned that building, Sikrim Goptal, and I'm sure you've heard of that name. His son
Yeah.
is Lee Goptal, who is the founder of Trojan Records. So at that time, when my dad had his studio, Lee Goptal was an accountant, and you can just imagine this is your family home. You're coming to and from work. You're seeing, and you must be hearing. And I heard that my dad was an amazing cook as well. So he used to cook in the studio, as you do, because you're recording all day. You're there till night. So obviously you're going to eat, sleep, and make music. So my dad had told me this, that one day there was a knock at the door, and standing there was he said, a little chubby Indian man, young Indian man, and that was Lee. And he asked to come in. And my dad said before you knew it, Lee was in there almost, well, pretty much every evening, day in, weekends, in there, catching a vibe, because as the studio was growing, more artists were coming to record. And and my dad was also cutting vinyl as well. So all his recordings, he was cutting vinyl as well. So my dad said, Lee just turned to him and said, "Look, Sonny, I want to do this. I really want to get in the music business. Can I give me some of these records to sell?" And that was the start. So my dad basically looked at him and said, "Look, are you crazy? You don't know a thing about music. What do you know?" And he said, "No." And there's a famous phrase that Lee said to my dad, and he said, "Sonny, if you give me SHIT, I can sell it." And my dad said, "Okay." I think that was convincing enough.
Well, it sounds to me that your dad, Sonny, was not only the pioneer of black music and a really big piece of the history in the UK, and we said all around the world. 'Cause we'll see why in a minute. But it was also the catalyst for the start of many other things that became really huge. And we're just mentioning Island Records and then Trojan Records. What let's just go a little bit more intimate, you and me. What is it or when is it the moment in your memory when you actually realized growing up that your dad was doing something so magical?
Oh my goodness me. We're kind of jumping the gun a bit. But the first, I would say the very, very first is when my dad um, had started as his business grew and as he became more successful in music. Then he had to use a bigger recording studio, and at that time he closed down the studio. Um, and I think when he took me to the studio as a child, and just seeing all these musicians and the instruments and watching what he could do, and because you remember back then there was no computer. It was, musician had to play. So just to see them one by one, and the time it took, and
Yeah.
then just seeing how they just watching my dad, because apparently my dad was very, very animated when he was in the studio. He couldn't read music, but he'd use his mouth, and he'd use his body. He was very, very physical. So that's how he would express himself when he's trying to arrange and produce music. Apparently
And
he would make the sound of the bass with his mouth, and all the different elements. He'd
of
use his
course,
mouth,
th-
and he did sing as well, because he did kind of some
yeah,
music. Sonny
yeah.
Earl. I found some vinyl, and apparently it's my dad singing.
Oh
So,
wow, okay. And also, live sessions, you must have been the witness of
mm,
so many amazing, truly emotional live sessions, the real ones, the ones where there are no special effects, there are no computerized kind of sound systems helping the talent, right? So it's
yes.
all about raw and really raw talent coming through.
Oh,
So it must have been magical. And also, your dad worked a lot with many other musicians, just to
mm,
mention a few: Jackie Edwards, Danny Livingstone, the Marvels, Anna
mm.
Spranglin, and Owen Gray,
Tony
and then
Washington.
the
Really,
fantastic,
really
amazing.
small. Really
Yeah, that's what I
small
was
on the
getting to
first. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
the fantastic,
Absolutely. Yeah.
amazing,
Mm,
huge successful record by Millie Small. My Boy Lollipop. I think that was
that's
the
correct.
title of the song.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how your dad met Millie and how this became a true hit?
Mm. Well, how my dad met Millie was because Island Records were upstairs. So Millie was signed to Island Records. And then when that track was thought of, I mean, it's just a natural thing that you would do, if because in order to rehearse a track, to write the track, to lay down the rhythm of the track, the arrangement, you need a space to do that. So it just made sense. You do it. There's a studio there, so that's where the track was laid. That's because Tony Washington, who was signed to Island Records, he played on Willie Small's track, and worked a lot in my dad's recording studio. So that's where the track was laid down, and that's where she would rehearse in Planetone's studio, my dad's studio. So that's how my
And
dad met her.
that track sold 7 million
Yeah,
copies, and it
yeah,
was number
yeah.
two in the UK charts, in the US charts.
Obviously the finishing of the track, to
Yeah,
lay the
yeah.
actual track, was done in another studio, but the basis of laying down the arrangement, with Tony played keyboards, Tony Washington, and apparently one of his song is on the B side as well. um, so and thankfully Tony is still alive. So that's why I've come to learn a lot more. I'm actually seeing him next week, and I can't wait.
Oh,
We
that's
do
amazing.
quite
So
often. Mm.
it's going to be even more deep in terms of knowledge, what you already know, because he was there all the time, right? He was
Yeah,
working with your
that's
dad.
right. Yeah,
So
and the good thing is that Millie is going to be honoured with a blue plaque. That's next week.
amazing.
Yes, next week, Saturday, the 28th, I believe. Yes, she's going to be on the
Yeah,
Boogaloo back next
amazing,
year. So
fantastic. Well,
I'm looking
congrats,
forward to that.
congrats to Tony Washington.
Yes,
Um,
Saturday the 20th.
yeah.
Mm.
And then in 1970, your dad opened the first established, really, Afro Caribbean record shop,
That's
and
right.
in London, right? Where was the shop?
In a place called Harlesden,
Hmm.
in Willesden Junction. So it's just a little way down the road, out of the town centre.
Yeah, up
And
going
that's
up from Kilburn High Road, the famous Kilburn High Road.
no, not from Kilburn. Where Harlesden is, you've got Harlesden is not too far from Kilburn, but then it's a little area called Willesden Junction, and
Oh
there's a
yeah, yeah,
station
yeah.
called
I know about that.
Willesden Junction Station,
And there
and
was Orbiton Records, right?
that's correct. Yes, yes, yes. He
You
opened
worked
that
at
in
that shop.
1970. I did, I did.
Yeah, how long?
Mhm.
For how long?
Oh my goodness me. I didn't really have a childhood. My father, I think because he really didn't have a son as such. Um, and I think it was a case that yes, I have a daughter, I have daughters, and they're going to learn the business. So, and I think because I was sort of the middle child, and then also the other thing is that my mother was a nurse. So she used to do night work. So you can imagine you can't leave your children on your own, on their own at such a young age. So my dad used to take us pretty much everywhere.
That was a natural
Yeah,
progression, right? To
absolutely.
to
It,
be
it
at the
wouldn't be
shop.
allowed. Wouldn't be allowed today, but yeah, I used to do a lot of my homework at the record shop in the studio. We did well. I'm a bit my baby sister Andrette. She was, so I was sort of more because I'm the middle child. So yeah, I used to do a lot of homework and stuff in those facilities.
What are the fondest memories you have of that shop and the life between the studio and the record shop?
Hmm. Oh my goodness me! The It was just because it was a specialist shop. So my dad, he loved all different types of music, and his love for rhythm and blues and jazz, and that's why he opened that shop because he wanted a shop that he called it the home of black music. Later on, that was the slogan for it, and that shop had any if you wanted any type of music my father would try and make sure that he would get it. So it was a melee of all different types of sounds coming and going. And then you have to remember with that comes different cultures, different people. But one of my most memorable moments were having Africa Bambata
Wow.
come into the shop. I was in my teenage years then, and I was literally starstruck seeing him come in, and
Anyone would be actually to
yeah, because
see.
he's such a larger than life character, and I remember him just saying to my dad, "Listen, I'm here in London, and I just asked around. I want music of my culture, and I want to get the sounds, different sounds, and they brought me here." So that
Wow.
was really quite an honor just to hear him say that. And then also Jules Holland.
Oh wow,
That was another
okay.
great moment. Jules used to come to our shop um, a lot in the mornings. I remember that, and he used to buy rhythm and blues, a lot of rhythm and blues and jazz. And as you know, at that time, he was a presenter on. Is it the Tube?
The tube, yeah, the tube,
Paulie Yates,
yes.
with Paulie
Yeah.
Yates as a teenager again, and sort of, my background having the interest in fashion. So, Paulie
Of
Yates, I
course.
mean, I used to
Yeah.
just marvel at her on the screen, such a beautiful woman. And So I knew who these people were. My dad didn't know who they were at all.
It must have been so
He didn't
crazy to
have a
just see them
clue.
jumping out of TV and coming into your shop, right? Into your dad's
Exactly.
shop.
And the
Yeah.
other thing is because the shop was not too far from the BBC studios, film studios. So it's we used to have people come and go. John Peel was very close. The great Tommy Vance,
Oh, wow.
Gary Crowley. We used to have come into the record shop. But I think John Peel, that again really was quite an amazing time to have a presence of someone so great as John Peel. The other thing, what was also amazing was because where the shop was located, it was at the industrial part of Harlesden. So the shop backed onto behind the shop at the back area. It's sort of like on one part of the land. So way around the back, you would have. It was an area called Park Royal, and in that area you had all the big factories of all the major products that we consumed, especially at that time. This is before we had our Marks and Spencers and all our ready-made meals. So Walls, we had Walls factory, we had Guinness, we had Heinz, McVitie's factories were based in Park Royal. Now, the thing about that was so great about these factories, well, when I said great, it was predominantly the staff that were employed at those factories were from the Windrush
Hmm.
generation. So West Indians in their droves. So you can imagine the size of these factories were huge. Um, but the thing is, the route to those factories, you had to, and then remember, there were not many bus connections or train, the train extensions. So the bus, I remember seeing, I mean, thousands of West Indians going to and from these factories in the morning. When they finished, they come back in their droves, and then what my dad did was he put a speaker box outside the shop. I think you can see here, they're right there.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
There it
So
is.
so he would actually diffuse music outside the
Yes,
shop.
yes,
And that
yes.
must have been so
Oh gosh.
comforting to
Oh
those
goodness. I mean,
people away from home and listening to
mm.
their music while coming back or going to work.
Absolutely, a bit like the Pied
Amazing.
Piper. Do you know what I mean? That's what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
So what he would do, he would put on all the tunes, and I'm telling you, I mean, back then it was. We used to have queues of people, especially like on a Friday when it's payday. They would be packed out inside the shop. Inside the shop, you couldn't even get into the shop. And I just remember, these Westerners, give me that tune, give me that tune, give me that tune. Their hands used to be go up. And, we trust them. So we used to have like piles, these men, because remember again, there weren't clubs or bars for that community due to racism. So again, you used to, and that was like the surgence of sound system and music, black music coming alive and becoming so great in Britain was because we used to have a lot of house parties. These West Indians had lots of house parties. There was on a Friday night. You every street road guaranteed had house parties. So these people, they used to buy a lot of music. I'm talking like 20. Used to get 25 records in a box. Sometimes you see them out with 75, 3 boxes, 4 boxes of records. That's a lot of vinyl. And that's how it was. And we used to just, I mean, it got to the stage where sometimes it was so busy. My mum, when she's off from work or her nights off, she used to come down and help. We had to employ extra staff. My sister Andra used to come and help. We'd be like churning out the bags, churning out. It was a phenomenal time. So that, really, really sits with me. And again, you know, I didn't just used to just sell records. I used to also play on the decks in the shop. So
Yeah. So
as
and
I
you know,
it was more in my teenage years, and I remember my dad used to train me literally how to handle vinyl, how to hold it, how to play it, So my musical ear, because I was exposed to these sounds, is, I can hear 2 bars of a tune and name that tune.
Fantastic.
That
You're a living kind of music recognition software, I'm
yeah,
sure. And
yeah.
and what a great, amazing piece of history that memory
Mhm.
is. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Oh, you're
Um,
more than
and
welcome.
and the shop didn't stop Sonny Roberts from keeping on producing music.
Mm-mm.
Absolutely the opposite, right? Because your dad started to produce amazing soca album musics. I think it was in the 1975, the first one with the Dominican singer Roy Alton, and that
Yeah.
first album. What do you remember? How was he doing all of this? How was he dividing the
Um,
time between this so amazingly, busy record shop and the busy record producing
he was
activity?
just a force to be reckoned with. He used to lock the shop and go straight to the studio, and be in the studio till probably 5, 6 in the morning. Come back sometimes even later, and then open the shop half tired. I remember, the sound sponges. We had a lot of those in his office in the record shop. So because he had a little office, so as there's a little bit here you can see this. He went through and rented
Yeah,
a
just to make
piece of
sure that
paper.
we tell our
Yeah,
listeners what's happening.
yeah,
You are sitting in your dad's office,
yes,
right? Yeah. And so at the back of you, I can see his amazing picture with
mm,
the picture of the shop and the way the shop and the road and the way the shop was situated in that road
hmm,
and the office
yeah,
situated aside. So
yeah.
yeah, because
So he
otherwise I'm
used
gonna
to
think, oh,
sleep.
what is
He used to sleep in the office during the day.
wow.
And then either the staff or myself, if I was there, like during school holidays, I was at the shop. Weekends, I was at the shop. So that's how we really sort of was able to do this. But we've kind of missed a very significant part, because you went from the shop to soca, in 1971.
Mhm.
Um, my dad was that was his kind of first major recording. He was approached by a Nigerian, who told him about this band in Nigeria called the Nkenges, and said, "Look, Sonny, I want to bring this band to London, to do some shows." So again, it was all those. Again, in 1970, you had Africans coming to London. So again, there was nothing for them in terms of entertainment. And then also, you have to remember, a lot of these venues wouldn't hold an event like that due to racism. So and put on shows like that, such as that. So they did some shows. The shows sold out, did really really well. And then my dad decided to record them. So they obviously, to record a 9-piece band, so he had to hire a bigger studio, much bigger studio called Chalk Farm Studios in Camden. So that's where the album was recorded, and that theoretically was the first Afrobeat album, and that was recorded in 1971. And then that album did really, really well, sold truckloads apparently in Nigeria. um, and that's testament. We know from I'm still in touch with the Omombala family, William Omombala and his daughter. So that album did very very well, and that brought the attention to other African musicians, and my dad did work with some other African musicians. And I think what's quite astonishing about that is that, being a Jamaican, you're producing African music, not ska, or to hear that sound. But I think because my dad was always listening to different music, and then remember, if you're producing ska, the BPM, it's fast. So hearing, I suppose, hearing, that African sound. Remember, you had Fela as well. You had the
Mhm.
'70s, that influence of you blue beats and everything. So that BPM, that sound, that's it was just so natural to him to produce something, African music. And then also you remember the bass of Jamaica, our drum beat. So that's basically what he did.
And
It's
and truly, I mean,
mm,
the fact that music has no borders, right? And your dad
absolutely.
really had it in his soul,
Mm,
this kind of music without borders, right? It didn't really
mhm,
matter where the music was coming from. He was passionate about, making sure that some kind of music genres will go through in a moment in which it was really hard to have a sense of community, because
yeah.
there were a lot of, like, restrictions on what people
Mm,
could do and not do. I mean, I remember coming to London the first time in the 90s, and in the 90s it was a totally different story.
mm,
But I went through the history of whatever happened before, between the 50s and the 70s, early 80s, and it's not a fun story to be told, right? For
mhm,
any different kind of black ethnic people that were moving to London. So again, your father was an amazing catalyst of, making sure that some kind of union could happen through music.
yes, yes,
And that's what he did,
yeah.
with his productions. And that's a truly big part of the positive history. Is that
Mm,
kind of story that you never hear too much. It's almost
mm-mm,
a blackout thing, because people don't write it in books, you don't
mm,
learn it at school. And but we here at Versus Emotion, we love blackout history. We love that kind of information that cannot come through any other way, right?
yeah.
And who better than you, his daughter, to tell us all about it?
And who better
So
than you to give
thank
me
you.
the opportunity to tell
I'm
his
so grateful
story?
you're here today. You have no idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is really
Mm,
inspiring to me. And we discussed it a few days ago and recently as well. I told you I'm truly honored. I'm truly honored to be able to tell your dad's story and
mhm,
your story, because you're very much, the legacy of light that is continuing this
mhm,
trailblazing, fantastic
mhm.
promenade into real music. And it was real music, as we said, because
Oh gosh, without a shadow
there
of a
was
doubt. I mean, the soca, again, as you said, just communities just working to and just trying to get their music across. And
Mhm.
Roy Alton, prime example. Approached my dad in the early '70s, and then they produced this album. My dad produced. Theoretically the first, and I can say that, was the first UK soca album, calypso. Well, I wouldn't even say calypso. I'm going to say soca, because why I say that is because when my dad produced that album, it brought the attention of, so this is where you got the global, reaching, international ears. um, it was heard by a man called Charlie Records, Charlie in New York, who's an amazing man. There's a film that was screened at Tribeca about Charlie. Wonderful man. And and when he heard this album, because he's a Trinidadian, and he said, "My gosh, you know, there's someone here making our music." So Dad got a phone call from Charlie and said, "Man, I love what you've done with this album. Listen, I'm doing the same thing in New York. I'm bringing the sounds of Trinidad to New York. I would like to make a UK market. Let's meet." And that's how it happened. This was the start of soca in the UK. So
And
Charlie now.
we
Hmm?
sorry to interrupt. And by the way, because we are going to we are starting the show with a little taste of Obuna Alu, which is one of the tracks, right, in the Afrobeat album
Mhm.
produced by your dad. I just wanted to make sure that we say that, so people know what they've been listening to at the starting of the show, at the beginning of the show.
Yes.
um Yeah, so continue, please. This is another amazing story.
Yeah, it
So
really is.
crossing,
Yeah,
unifying communities, diffusing music
yeah.
everywhere, and also bridging
Mm.
different countries from overseas and continuing to trailblaze, basically.
Oh yes, and so Charlie came to London with a bag of music and said to my dad, "Look, these are these songs that are coming out. Do you want to license them?" And when my dad heard them, my dad was like, "Yeah." And then the sounds were traveling, and that's how calypso became speeded up. Because when you listen to Tell Them, you think about it, this album was produced in 1975, and you hear that is not calypso, that's soca. Tell Them is, it's so fast. So that was the start of it. And that's why Charlie now took that sound and said, right, guys, Trinidad, we need to speed this up. Here's this album, this is what we want, not this la 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 calypso sound. We want that faster BPM. And there you had Sugar Boom Boom, you had Gimme the Ting, you had Lorraine, and these were records that my dad licensed, and he created a label specially for soca, and that was the Sunburst label. And all those tracks were licensed and distributed by my dad, Sonny. And that was the start and the surge of soca. You know, and then when this is when it really blew up, is when Sugar Boom Boom was released, and that brought the attention of the sound man. The
Yes.
sound man in London. You had people like Daddy Ernie come to the shop. Daddy Ernie was always in the shop. I have a love for that man so much. And watched Ernie grow from the days of Jerry and all those guys from Harlesden. But to see, like, people like Ernie, Daddy Ernie, and some of those sound guys say, "What? We want that record. We want to give me that record." And that's where you were hearing Sugar Boom Boom in the dances, and that was the start of it. That's where soca started to get popular, because when we had a soundman put on a soca record, it was like, wow. But when you listen to the lyrics, it just really brought the dance, just brought the dance alive. So yes, that was quite something. And then you know my dad went on to supporting the Notting Hill Carnival, and we had floats, and you know DJs were coming through. Lord Sam, Smokey Joe, you know these guys, Martin J, who is just a phenomenal guy. My dad sponsored him as a DJ, and he's a great person, and he does some amazing work in soca today. Um, a real ambassador for soca, brilliant. But yes, just to see, I'm so proud to see it grow to that level. And quickly, I'll just mention that Michelle. If you go on our social media pages, you'll see a tribute from Michelle Montano, because my father was responsible for breaking his career. His first album, Too Young to Soca, we distributed that in London for his mother, Lady Elizabeth, his mother. So it back then, I just remember her phoning all the time, because she managed her son. You imagine a little 9-year-old kid with such a talent. So she used to phone, "How many records you sell? How's it going? How's it
Yeah.
going?" And she came to London. She came to London to see my dad, and it's just so lovely because we've made that connection again. We met in Jamaica, and just to talk about those things, and just to see Michelle now, how huge he is and doing so well. So I feel really, really proud of
And you should be. And
Africa.
I think we can now say a little bit about what happened when a silver record Win came out.
Yes.
Um, I think it was 1987, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it was for Can't Be With You Tonight by
Mm-hmm.
Judy Boucher. And what happened there? Because I know there's a juicy story behind that silver record.
Oh my goodness. It is, yeah. Well, in the sort of late 70s, my dad decided he always went against the grain. So he always wanted to, when he was producing, he didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. And I think because he loved blues so much and Nat King Cole, Sam Cooke. Um, so remember, then you had reggae coming out, that sound of reggae, your Marvel, Waiting in Vain, hearing those kind of lyrics. And, it was a case of, I want to do it softer. I'm not going to go for the hard reggae. So my dad started to produce softer reggae. And he was approached by a great singer, Tim Chando, who was singing, amazing writer. I mean, if he was around today, I mean, there's songs today was, it could relate. You can still play them. Um, so this sound again was very popular with the Windrush community because they're getting older as well. So you want something for them as well, So he was this type of music was more sort of love songs. And so anyway, he went on from producing Tim, and those albums, I mean, it sold so well. And I think that spurred him on to really, he knew he had something. And again, you had some of the sound men playing Tim's records as well. Because you have to think you're in the dances and you're hearing, your buff, 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 buff reggae, and then you want something a bit softer. And the women loved that type of music because you had lovers rock as well. So it was a case of this softer reggae, and the lyrics just really warmed their hearts. So with that came other artists such as, you had Reuben Richards, you had, oh my gosh, Rocky Campbell, Johnny Hope. And then came, well, Belinda Parker, amazing woman who did a cover of Gypsy Love and softened it up. And that was another record that played in the dances, Gypsy Love. So then a young lady, he was approached by a young lady by the name of Judy Boucher. And she was, great singer and was working with a brilliant writer called Felix de Silva, who wrote this song for her. And then asked Dad to produce the album, which he did. And one of the tracks on the album, called "Can't Be With You Tonight," was picked up by Lizzie Webb on TVAM. Lizzie Webb is the exercise woman, she was like the lady version of Mr. Motivator. So, and I remember it so clearly because I'm going to school and I used to have this show on TV. And one morning I heard this record playing on TV, and I thought, my gosh, that's Daddy's record.
I know that record, right?
And I remember running upstairs and I was like, Dad, your record's on TV. It was just, that's how it was. And, he's like, what? And he come running downstairs and we're all standing there like, my gosh. And she played it every day. This woman was playing this record every single day, every morning. That was her, after she'd do her vibrate, that was her come down, slow down the pace, and she would relax to this. And then the phones just started ringing. And because, again, you see, it wasn't just the West Indian community that this song related to, the Irish community, because the Irish love country and Western. And so you had, and I think because of the lyrics and the way how the song was, it was a ballad, very soft. And apparently it just blew up the airwaves on TVAM. And then we got approached and the track went national. And this track stayed in the charts for 14 weeks in the British UK charts. And it was at number 2. And the I remember at the time when it was at number 5, and then this other track came out of nowhere like a bolt of lightning by a lady called Madonna. And
Of course.
yes, and
Of
I when I
course.
heard that track, I said to my dad, I said, it's going to be difficult.
Mm.
A song like this is going to be very, very hard. And this song was called La Isla Bonita by
Mm-hmm.
Madonna.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I don't think we're going to get this number 1. And I'm telling you, that's why it was in the charts for so long, because we were neck and neck with Madonna and she was number 1. And that's why it was in the charts for 14 weeks. And I'm so proud to say that that record, Judy Boucher holds a record for being the first Caribbean to hold a record in the UK British charts for so long, at 14 weeks. So,
But the memory linked to these events, which
yeah.
is you suddenly hearing on TV that song and recognizing it as your father's and going up to your dad and saying, "Dad, that's your song on TV. That's amazing, isn't it?"
Yeah, yeah.
And being 14 weeks as number 2 in
Mm.
the British national charts is
Yeah,
not really a joke, is it? So,
yeah.
fantastic. And so, what happened after this big, like, you know, uh, national chart event for that track can't be with you tonight? Uh, did your father continue producing? What happened after that? How do you recall
Oh
anything
my
happening
goodness.
after that?
Yeah, he pretty much, recorded people like Joyce Bond. That's another album. That's another great singer. So he was still recording music for the community. And then he had now moved, because obviously, revenue, if you have a hit record, you need a bigger premises, and your ambitions, you want to thrive, so he decided to open up a bigger shop. So Orbitone Records moved premises to the main Harleston High Street. And then at that time, that was the introduction of CDs, you see. So I think Dad just thought, I need a bigger space now. This is where the market is going. And, sadly, that's where vinyl started to wane,
Mm.
because people started to buy CDs. And I remember my dad saying, "This thing not going to last. It's not going to last." You know, this little thing that we're looking at. And I think for him it was not an insult, but he didn't like it much. But he thought, well, I need to keep up with the times, as he did throughout his whole career, and went into that sort of still selling vinyl, because we still had to sell vinyl, because that was a market, especially for the West Indian community. For DJs, for sound systems. At that time they were still playing vinyl, especially it was more sort of 45s, 12 inches
Mm,
they were
mhm,
playing. Sorry,
mhm.
12
Yeah,
inches they were playing a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. I
So
personally have 250 vinyl pieces from my
goodness me,
parents' record collection. And I don't know
wow,
how many 45s, because we used to call them 45s in Italy,
that's
but
right.
I don't even know how many I have of those. Just and they are one of the, they are one of the few amazing, really emotional kind of legacy objects, if you want to call them that way, that
Absolutely,
my
100%.
parents left behind. So,
Hmm.
mhm.
Hmm. Yeah.
So what are you doing? What are you planning? What are you how do you see this legacy history evolving? um are you planning events? Are you planning, I know you're already doing a lot of amazing, beautiful things, and you've been doing them through the years, but
Thank you.
anything you would like to share? And also, where can we find you and your dad's legacy on social media?
Yes, I am actually doing a few public talks now. So I've done a few, and as well as there's plans for things. Again, little interviews here and there. But next year, I'm kind of working on planning for next year for an exhibition, which I think is in April. And then a couple of other things for next year. I won't talk now, but there's going to be something
Amazing.
quite
Keep
spectacular
us
in the
posted.
next
We have
couple of years.
versus emotion will be there a hundred
Yes,
percent.
yes. Well, I
Um,
keep myself busy and just trying to get the history across, especially in the UK. Um, because there's a lot of interest now in Black history, and I think especially in music history as well. The artists here, especially today, what they've achieving and what they're doing. I think my father's story is a thing that can inspire people, because it's got a lot of elements of passion, entrepreneurial, community, history. It covers a whole spectrum, and just people working together. So I think that's what I'm doing a lot more of,
that's absolutely
trying to do.
an amazing springboard. The
Yeah.
spark for anything to come up in the future.
And
And
also to talk to schools as well. I'd like to do that, to talk
that's what
to
I was
them
going to
as well.
say.
Yeah.
Exactly. We should learn these things in school. I mean, how
Mm.
useful is going to be knowing about doing equations, right? Instead of knowing about black or any music history, really,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so, absolutely, I agree with you. Schools should open their doors. Listen, teachers,
Absolutely. And
you should.
something, Lara, the surge of vinyl now. There is a
Mhm.
surge, there's a huge interest in vinyl. And something, when it really kind of hit me how important vinyl is, because I now live in Jamaica, and in this talk that we're having, you mentioned after us moving, after the Judy Boucher, what did my dad do? He retired and returned to Jamaica.
Mhm.
That was after he opened moved premises to the high road. Um, so that was in 96. He moved 1996. He moved, retired, and moved to, well, I should say semi-retired.
He
um,
will. I'm sure he was
oh
still
yeah,
working
he kept busy.
nonstop.
He kept busy in Jamaica. He didn't just
Right.
sit down
Yeah.
under a palm tree. No, no, no. By far, no. So moving to Jamaica, because I spent a lot of time. I mostly live in Jamaica, and when it hit me is going into my dad's studio and picking a CD and putting that on, and it doesn't play. That's when you realize the importance of vinyl.
Hmm.
So all
There
those
is nothing
artists,
that can delete vinyl.
you
Vinyl
cannot.
is impressed forever. That's music impressed forever, and it's always going to be
Absolutely.
there. Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Hmm.
encourage every artist, forget your iPre freeze, the electronic stuff, because that can be wiped
Hmm.
away. You need to press vinyl.
Hmm. Hmm.
That is
Yes.
documentation. That is your history. That is a proof of history. Everything is on there. So,
That's what they should put in their time capsules, right? For
absolutely.
future
Vinyl.
generations to find. And of course vinyl players, that would be useful too, because
Hmm.
otherwise we can't play them, right?
Yeah,
So I still have my father's whole sound system in the
yeah.
back of me in my living room
Hmm.
here, and it's got every analog instrument to play music that you can
Absolutely.
possibly imagine, and it's all there. And still use it to this very day to play all
Exactly.
the vinyl they left with me, my
Exactly. I'm not
parents.
against
So,
tech. I love tech. Tech is a great thing.
oh
Um,
yeah, I work in tech, so you can imagine.
yes. Thank you
But
very much.
it's not the only thing that helps us to keep holding on to the good memories, right? It's
Yes.
not tech is cannot be the only thing.
Mm-mm.
Where can we find you online? You have a very active Instagram and Facebook page, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes, we do.
Yes. So,
Thanks to my sisters as well, because I have two, well, three sisters theoretically, three sisters I do, and they all do their part, and I'm trying to
of
sort of
course, of
rein them
course.
in a bit more. I think they more or less, because they're a little bit camera shy. The little one is, the younger one. She's a feisty one, and she'll be out there as well. She comes out, but she lives in New York. But yeah, we all kind of do our bit. So we're trying to get on more social media platforms. At the moment, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we have a website, but we are planning to be on more social media platforms. Yeah.
That's fantastic. It
Hmm.
was such an amazing conversation. I
Hmm.
have uh, been inspired by your story and your dad's history since the very first time we talked about it. And I'm so happy we finally recorded. And I hope this is going to be only the start to spread the beautiful message of trailblazing talent that your father was. And I hope to be part of any next event that you're planning. And as of course we keep in touch, we can't deny we're friends as well. So we are gonna be in touch. We're gonna
Yeah,
keep
and
in
we
touch,
met in music, didn't we?
and we
Through
met in
music.
music, and
Yeah,
we met in
we certainly did,
you
and
know
we
I
realised, how passionate we are. So
yes,
we met in the
yes.
clubs, didn't we?
Yes, we used to go around London
We
clubs, by the way,
certainly
just
did.
in case.
Yes, yeah,
And all those beautiful friends that we have in
yeah.
common.
22 years ago, isn't it?
Yes, about 25, maybe
I think you're right. Yes, gosh, time
a
flies.
quarter of a century ago.
Mm, mhm.
But yeah, it was, and London was booming with amazing clubs and music and DJs. But that's the story we're gonna tell another time, because
Mhm.
we probably need a month of a podcast, as long as a month, because we have so much to say
Yeah.
about a lot of stuff. And I know you have other amazing music and stories to tell. Thank you so much, Cleon, for being here. I'm truly grateful, I'm honored, and I can't wait to help you tell this story over and over again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And your platform versus emotion is absolutely brilliant. And I've seen some clips of what you've done, and the artists that you have on your platform. So, and well done. You've been doing this for what, 16 years?
Yes, not always
Oh,
on podcast, but also online, promoting underground artists, giving them a voice, really a voice that they wouldn't have anywhere else. So,
mhm.
and we are proud of that, and we are proud of telling stories that can really inspire people, as you just said before. If anyone, even only one or two people, take out of what we put online any kind of inspiration, we are more than happy that's happening. But we evolved throughout the years, so we have a few thousands around following us now, and we want to say thank you to all of them, by the way. Truly grateful for their
Brilliant.
following and their interactivity with us. But seriously, I think we need a part two.
That's
I
so
think we
good to
need
hear. Thank you.
I think we need a part two, and
Yeah.
explore a little bit more about your amazing musical background as well, and your other amazing stories that you have. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon, and I
Thank you.
will. I will keep on listening to that amazing Afrobeat album you shared with me, which we are going to play a little taste at the beginning of the podcast.
Oh, enjoy. It's quite a something. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes you move. I'm telling you, I was moving,
Telling
man.
you. Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Oh, enjoy. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for having.
Versus Emotion Podcast, organic conversations with creative minds.